Angela, how are you feeling?
Feeling good. It was powerful to be able to share the film with everyone. To be able to, I've watched about 3 times already. So, but every time I watch it, I see something different, and it hits a little bit differently every time.
What stood out to you this time?
I think the end where I actually got teary-eyed, even though I've seen it so many times already. And the end where they say mother, when Twyla was talking about Mother Earth's heartbeat was the sound of the drum, and how she's calling everyone to come home, and you have to jump on this restorative. We have to get on the restorative piece, or humans are not going to survive. So that really hit me hard this time, because it's becoming more and more apparent to me that is the truth.
Yeah, that restorative revolution was such a powerful phrase. I was really here for that. Yeah.
And Sophie, I don't know, I saw that you posed the questions to me directly.
Oh, sorry about that.
Wanted to make sure that you that wasn't on purpose.
No, that was not. Thank you. So those 2 questions: what does Indigenous sovereignty mean to you, and what does food sovereignty mean to you? How do you feel about opening the floor, Angela, to have folks communicate with that? I know Shmuel has a question or a thought. So if
I don't know if people have thoughts on, prior to the film, what your expectations were before coming into watching the film. If you had any idea what food sovereignty meant, or if you thought about food sovereignty prior to seeing the film, what you thought about it. And then now, if that is different now that you've seen this film, and if you think it's different for Indigenous people as well.
Shmuel, do you want to share your thoughts? And please, everyone.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hi. I want to ask next question. I situated here not from beginning journey more better by because I see majority of the film. I want to ask next question. I want to know. It is a central idea of this film, this encouraging of traditional and indigenous forms of agriculture.
I'm not sure that I understand your question. You are breaking up just a little bit. Would you be willing to type your question into the chat so I can make sure that we can get a good answer?
Yeah, I can, but I asked if central idea of the film this encouraging of indigenous forms of agriculture. Okay, go to.
While he is typing, I see there's another hand up, and then y'all please know that you can speak freely. So chime on in whenever you feel it.
Allison, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Is our microphone on?
It is, yes. Welcome.
Love the film. Can you see us?
We cannot see you. I can see if that helps you to start your video.
Okay, start my video. Yes. They will, yeah.
Fabulous.
Hey, Moss.
Hey, Moss.
Hey, Alice. This is the second time we've seen this film and couldn't remember where we saw it, but boy, I get teary-eyed all through. And it's amazing how many of the presenters came to this through their addiction. And they talked about it. I'm glad for that. That's Charlotte.
Hey, y'all.
And we want, or I want to remind people that we do have an interest in indigenous seeds, and we have some that have been passed down a long time and have access to others.
One of the things that I'm concerned with is we have a fair number of seeds that I think are from indigenous origins, but they don't have a complete chain of custody, a story. And part of what we would like to do is to find and make those connections so that the seeds can get back to their people. And I want to hold up this one because this is one of our mysteries. It's a collection of 13 different varieties that are always grown together, and they have multiple uses. And all I know is I got them from the Seed Savers Exchange, and they are from somewhere in North Alabama from a Williams family. So it's the Williams family seeds. And I take them wherever we're giving away seeds and ask people, do you recognize any of these? Are these your seeds? And so far, no one has recognized them. So, you know, that's our quest.
I know this has come up frequently, especially during the first session, Angela, when we were talking about the stories of seeds and how important those were. I'm glad that you're sharing those to see if we can find their story.
Do you guys have pictures? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, please speak.
Pictures or anything of the seeds? Because there's a few of us in this group. There is a woman who is of Cherokee and Creek descent who is in North Alabama, who's also an herbalist and an herbal instructor to a few of us in this group. And her family carried on a lot of agricultural practices, and she may know some of the origins of some of those, or could point you in the right directions if there's pictures or some other information of the seeds somewhere that we can share with her.
Thank you.
So Shmel's question that he put in the chat is about the central idea of the film encouraging of indigenous and traditional forms of agriculture. I just wanted to bring that to the forefront and see if anybody had any thoughts on that question.
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. The central idea of the film, this encouraging of indigenous and traditional forms of agriculture, do you feel like that's a central theme in the film? And if so, does anybody have any thoughts they want to share on that?
Well, I have some thoughts. Don't know if they'll be useful to anybody, but in my area, my understanding is there are families here who have carried indigenous seeds without knowing what they are for a number of generations. And there are bits and pieces of lore about gardening that have been handed down, especially in my husband's family. And we don't know where they come from, and we don't know where to take them. But when I grow corn, I grow it with beans and squash that are well adapted, and I'll go out into the field and just kind of be with the plants, and sometimes the plants will tell me things. So I have that kind of relationship with the seeds and the plants, but I don't have any way to validate it other than putting it into practice. So it's difficult to know exactly what the practices are, but I have, I read things, and I will read about how to plant a Native American garden, and I will try it according to those plans, and then certain things will work and certain things won't. And I just keep going forward with that. And it's a matter of piecing things together. It's kind of like making a quilt. You have a lot of old fabrics and you have little pieces cut from them and you try to piece them together. So that's where I am with it, without a strong family tradition at all. That's it.
I don't know if anyone else has comments, and I don't want to hog the the mic when it comes to this kind of stuff, but so I do think, as far as the question that was posed, I think that the central idea, I'll preface by saying that for the last 400 years, American agriculture has been built on an idea of monofarming, monocropping. And we see how that is depleting. Scientifically, we're now seeing how that is depleting soil health and resources, and it's just not working. And it's actually putting us in worse shape in the United States than we've been since humans have been here. And I think this film showcases why it's important to listen to Indigenous knowledge on agricultural practices, because we have been the stewards of this land since time immemorial. And I appreciate the point that you guys brought up about the sobriety, because when settlers came here, everything that my ancestors knew as far as their way of life, their spiritual practices, their agricultural practices, everything that they knew was taken away. So a lot of people turned to alcohol and drugs to cope, and still do to this day. And actually, a lot of people don't know this, but in the rations that the government gave to Indigenous people on reservations, that included alcohol. So it was actually given to them. And I'm a nurse by background, and there's actually scientific studies that people of Indigenous Mongoloid descent, which includes Japanese people, Indigenous American people, their bodies actually process alcohol differently on a genetic level than any other race. And we just can't, our bodies do not process it well. So we do not do well with alcohol. So when we learn our traditional systems, our traditional spiritual ways, our food ways, our life ways, and we start taking that back, it's a healing process. It is such a healing process, and we don't need that alcohol or those drugs anymore. I've seen that with so many people in my family. And that also points to Indigenous people's way of life. Is our spiritual practice is built on, it's an earth-based religion. It's an earth-based way of life. Everything we do revolves around plants and other animals. So it all ties in together. So I think that this film just showcases that, and showcases how all of those things fit together like puzzle pieces to make a whole picture for us, and how that knowledge is really important for healing our environment and healing the earth. But that's just my interpretation.
I agree with that. What I really liked about the film was how it had the whole broader picture in there, and in ways that it's hard to even express and put into words. Like the first time in the film that it really brought tears to my eyes is when the one group of fishermen didn't catch anything and the other group of fishermen gave them like a salmon, and what that tribe means to life and psychological health, and where we lost that connection that we're all one, and if one member of our tribe is going hungry, like that's going to harm us all. And that's not anything you see in the practice of capitalism, and it's why so many of us suffer.
Oh,
And I grew up I kind of grew up between two worlds because my mom, both of my parents are part Indigenous, my mom more so than my dad. And my mom grew up knowing some of her traditional practices, even though she didn't know that they were solely Indigenous practices. And then my dad did not. And so like there are some things that are just inherent to me that are not to other people, and I forget that. So like I grew up sharing with everyone, and like I have a community of Indigenous people that I work with, and we all share, and we actually have a mutual aid organization, and that's just part of who we are. So there are things that are pointed out in the film that I don't realize are foreign to other people. So and I appreciate you pointing that out, Joanna.
Does anyone else want to share a part of the film that was impactful for them or that stood out?
I really enjoyed the part about catching and eating the rat and realizing that the rat had transformed things that people can't eat into medicine that can heal. And I think that's just such a wonderful thing to realize.
I thought that was really cool too. And watching that whole process and sharing that information with her niece, and that whole thing was amazing to watch. And being able to show more about the land right there. And hey, here's a rattlesnake den, and this is how you identify these things. I mean, everything she said was just knowledge. It was great.
I like, Joanna, you sort of already said this, but I think, yeah, what you described as kind of just like the holisticness of this whole film. I mean, and Lawrence, you kind of spoke to this too, that like, it's not just a film about Indigenous foodways. It's not just a film about, it's like, it's not about any one thing. I think something that was powerful to me to see, it was like, it's about addiction, it's about physical health, it's about like intergenerational learning. Like I think one of the powerful parts for me was just seeing like how in every scene there was all this really just like good, juicy, like intergenerational, not just learning, like I feel like knowledge is in some ways like an inadequate word, because it was more than that, like that part where I forget everyone's names, but where they were saying to that group of young men, like, hey, imagine when you're in the position of this elder, and just like speaking to young people in that way. And just, I think our society like doesn't offer space for that. And I think to me, that's like the powerful piece of thinking about this work, is like, it's all held in culture and held in community and held in those relationships. And like, you can't in some ways distill it down further than that. And so like, it's about learning these like specific, practices, or learning like how to, tend these crops, or how to like process this animal or whatever. Like the knowledge is in some ways sort of like the end, but the means is much more important. And I think that's something that I think about a lot with like our work with ASAN, is kind of like, you got to build the container, and sort of, if you build the container, the rest will come. And I think that's something that I don't always see in conversations about like changing our agricultural system. It's sort of like, no, that what we have to do is change these things about soil health, or change these things about this. And it misses that piece of like, where's the like the personal healing, where's the community health, where's the like I don't know, the heart of it, I guess.
And that, I think, also points to the way of life, Alice. Like, it's not just an agricultural practice, it's a way of life, as far like into the spirituality, into the way that we eat, into the way that we think about our food. And like she talked in the beginning about, like, we're not just going to the grocery store to go get, like, knowing where your food comes from, whether you're growing it or harvesting it or hunting it, makes that food much more whole, because you understand whether it's like why it's important to grow it in a good way or to hunt in a good way. You know, I think that all plays into part of that picture that is not there anymore. We're missing that in current society. And I think that harms us.
How do you think, Angela, if I can pose a question to you directly, but definitely open the space up for everyone, what do you think someone could do in real time to bring us closer to that space? I know it's a big question. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, there's so many things. There's so many things. You know, we were talking in the chat, some of the things that we were talking about, Larry had posed some questions about learning the different, you know, some agricultural practices on pear and apple trees, reaching out to, the hard part is there's a lot of that knowledge is lost. A lot of communities, a lot of indigenous communities are just starting to relearn it themselves. Because I think the best thing would be to go out and make contact with people who are embodying those practices and ask them how they can help. Ask how you can help, or ask how you can learn from them, or ask how you can support them. If you can find it, that's the hard part, especially locally. I feel like in the Southeast, it's really tricky. A lot of people don't realize this. In the media and movies and things, you'll see a lot more Plains tribes, which are like the Lakota Sioux, other Sioux nations. You see that more frequently because they were the last to be colonized. The East Coast and the Southeast were colonized first. So a lot more of our information is lost. It's harder to find that information. But as Mr. Larry said, they, you know, like the Porch Creek have an orchard and they have a garden. I'm sure, you know, you guys, wherever you live, try to find the closest indigenous community and try to connect with them and see how you can support them. And you'll learn, just in everyday practices, you'll learn little tidbits of knowledge of like how they do things. And that resonates in such a, it's like a ripple in a pond, like when you throw a pebble in a pond, you know. That's my suggestion. It might be easier said than done, but
I think definitely worth the effort. Yeah, for sure. Want to open up the floor for anyone else to share? I love Trevor's comment in the chat about how understanding the Indigenous culture as a whole, that ecological health is a reflection of human health. I think that's such a really powerful thought. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I don't know where this fits in, but I've been thinking about, I've been taking part of this like study group right now with a group called the Southern Movement Assembly, that's about decolonization and abolition and mutual aid, and yeah, learning from some really amazing Indigenous organizers in the Southeast about decolonization and what that means. And we talked in our last session about there's this academic article that's a little dense but very important, I think, called "Decolonization is Not a Metaphor," Just a little bit talking about how, like, I feel like decolonization is one of these words that has come up and sort of become in vogue to talk about, oh, like decolonizing our diet or decolonizing whatever. And I mean, I'm like guilty of having used that language in that way. But this article and this conversation that went along with it was sort of about how, no, decolonization is like a very specific thing, and it involves like very specific and big sort of shifts of power and resources and like control, and that we shouldn't like water that down by in some ways kind of co-opting that term to mean something more watery and more like metaphorical, I guess. And so I guess I say that it's not really a question, but I think I'm just naming that as something I'm like holding in, you know, with these prompt questions of like, what does food sovereignty mean to you? What does like Indigenous sovereignty mean to you? And it's like, I think especially as like, yeah, a person like descended from colonizers, it's like, what like that means a really big thing. And let's not like water down that question. It's like, it's not a comfortable thing, honestly, for people who look like me. And I think it's something we should like hold with the appropriate amount of weight and like really try to like hold our feet to the fire about, you know. So, I don't know, just offering that up is not a question, but just something I'm sitting with, I guess.
Absolutely. And it brings us beautifully back to those prompt questions. And if anyone wants to share that thought and to sit in that discomfort with us, come on with it. Yeah.
Can't really see because of my camera view, but my t-shirt today
Yeah,
says Decolonize.
there we go.
Yes.
But that, you're exactly right. It's not comfortable because it goes down. I mean, it's deep all the way down to those power systems, our economy, the religion in this country, everything. And it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's like, oh, as much as I can sit here as like a white person in what we call Alabama in 2021, like if I can try to imagine this place 1,000 years ago, that's in some ways how difficult it is to imagine, like, what does it look like to decolonize this place? It's like, oh, it's in some ways beyond my imagination, but I think that's like not a reason to squirm out of it, you know?
Exactly.
I get stuck on the term decolonize as a negative term. So what replaces colonization? Indigenization, you know?
Re-indigenize.
Yeah.
Indigenize is a word.
There you go.
Yeah.
Laying back. Laying back.
Land back. There you go. Well, and I think the restorative revolution is a
Right.
really, yeah, I think that's the line is, you know, to reach back and listen, which is, I think, the task that we have at hand. Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
the listen part is so important. I keep coming back to just an idea that I came across many years ago, that Anglo-American people never became North American, that they brought Europe with them and still have it with them. And that what we need to do is listen and learn the names, the original names of the places, instead of putting the name of the place we came from on top of that piece of earth. And I'm amazed when I look at my herb garden, how many of those herbs are not very well adapted to right here because they came from somewhere else. And that's how my people learned to heal themselves. So they brought that with them, or that's how they learned to eat. So they brought that with them. And it, you know, it's good as long as it's in addition to what was already here, but not instead of what was here.
Well, I think so often we didn't just bring Europe with us, we brought stories of what we thought Europe was. And that's the conversation about Thanksgiving at the end of the movie when they were talking about this isn't a story that's real. And we'd love to get to the story that is real. So I think that's certainly a component of it, is stepping away from narratives that were created in order to serve a purpose that was destructive. Yeah.
I just got chills at Alice's comment. And I'm about to get teary-eyed talking about it. You're 100% right. We know the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, but how many people know about the Taino?
Yep.
I knew that that's what they were called. That's very real. Whew, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. We are at a place now where we do kind of have to wrap it up. I'm sorry to say, this has been a really amazing conversation. And thank you, Angela, for bringing the movie to our forum and to our screens today. Let me say one last offering for if there's anything about the movie that you want to share really quickly. Otherwise, I'd like to talk a little bit about ASAN if I can. Yeah. All right. Well, for those of you who don't know, or to remind everyone, this year ASAN has deepened our commitment to being a values-driven, farmer-centric, member-led grassroots network. We are strengthening our collective muscles to address the most pressing challenges farmers and aspiring farmers are facing: access to capital, access to land, environmental threats, and so many more, especially those that involve strengthening our community. To do this work, we have been undergoing a membership scale up and to build a just and resilient food system we desperately need, in which our children's children deserve. We need farmers and non-farmers to link arms together and demand and create change. So please, there's a place for you in this movement. Become a member today, join or renew your membership. Check out the link that Mona has put in the chat. Thank you all so much. Angela, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Y'all have a beautiful day. I'll see y'all at future forum sessions. Thank you.
Great to see all of y'all. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.